The phrase American dream often arrives in Australia polished by distance. It is imagined as a clean narrative of boundless opportunity, wide suburban streets, and effortless upward movement. From afar, it appears orderly and loud in its confidence, a promise built on ambition and reward. Yet when Australians encounter the lived reality surrounding that idea, the contrast feels immediate and quietly disorienting. The dream exists, but not in the simplified form many expect. It is less a destination and more a constant state of motion, driven by pressure as much as possibility. Early impressions tend to focus on intensity. American cities move with a sharp tempo, where schedules feel compressed and daily interactions carry an undercurrent of urgency. Conversations about work surface quickly, not as small talk but as social orientation. Professional identity often functions as a primary introduction, a way of locating one's value within a larger system. For Australians accustomed to clearer separations between work and personal life, this emphasis can feel disproportionate, even intrusive. Success is visible everywhere, yet so is the anxiety of maintaining it. Beneath the surface, deeper cultural differences begin to emerge. The American dream is built on individual responsibility to an extent that can feel absolute. Progress is framed as a personal achievement, while setbacks are often internalized as personal failure. Social safety nets exist, but they are less culturally foregrounded, creating an environment where self-reliance is not only encouraged but expected. Australians, raised within a stronger narrative of collective support and institutional balance, often notice how quickly Americans learn to normalize risk as a permanent condition rather than an exception. Everyday situations quietly reinforce this mindset. Long working hours are discussed without drama, as if endurance itself were a moral quality. Time off is negotiated rather than assumed, and rest can carry a subtle sense of guilt. Housing, healthcare, and education are spoken about in strategic terms, as long-term calculations rather than shared guarantees. These patterns are rarely framed as hardship from within. Instead, they are often described as the necessary cost of freedom and possibility. To outside observers, however, the emotional weight of that cost becomes difficult to ignore as the dream reveals its less visible contours. Over time, Australians observing this environment begin to notice how aspiration shapes emotional life. Optimism is present, but it is often conditional, tied closely to performance and momentum. Confidence is encouraged publicly, even when private uncertainty runs deep. Failure is treated as a lesson, yet its consequences can linger in practical ways that are not easily undone. This creates a culture where resilience is admired, but vulnerability is carefully managed. The dream survives partly because it demands belief, even when evidence feels uneven. Social interactions reflect this underlying structure. Networking is not confined to formal spaces. It appears in casual settings, woven into conversations that might otherwise be purely social. Opportunity is perceived as something that must be actively pursued and defended. Australians, used to a more understated approach to ambition, often sense how relationships in the United States carry an added layer of purpose. Connections are warm and open, yet subtly transactional, shaped by the understanding that tomorrow's stability is never fully guaranteed. The role of money further sharpens the contrast. In Australia, financial success is often tempered by social expectations of modesty and balance. In the American context, wealth is more openly discussed and visually present, functioning as a signal of progress rather than something to downplay. At the same time, economic disparity is more visible, existing side by side in ways that feel stark. The American dream promises upward movement, but it does not always provide a soft landing, and this tension is felt in everyday choices and long-term planning. Media and storytelling reinforce these ideas. Narratives of self-made success dominate cultural imagination, offering clear heroes and clear paths, even when reality is more fragmented. Australians encountering these stories begin to understand that the dream is as much a psychological framework as an economic one. It organizes hope, justifies sacrifice, and gives meaning to struggle. Yet it also narrows the definition of success, leaving less room for lives that prioritize steadiness over acceleration. As these observations accumulate, the American dream starts to look less like a universal promise and more like a demanding contract. It offers possibility, but asks for constant engagement in return. For Australians, this realization does not arrive as disillusionment so much as recalibration. The dream is real, but it operates on assumptions that differ sharply from those formed in a culture where balance and collective cushioning play a larger role. And within that difference, the true nature of the dream begins to come into focus, not as a myth to be accepted or rejected, but as a system that shapes how people measure worth, time, and security. Seen through this lens, the American dream reveals how deeply it reshapes daily perspective. Many Australians come to recognize that ambition in the United States is not simply encouraged. It is structurally embedded. Life decisions are filtered through future projections, contingency plans, and constant self-optimization. The present moment often feels provisional, valuable mainly as a stepping stone towards something larger. This forward-leaning orientation creates energy and innovation, but it also leaves little space for stillness without justification. The emotional climate reflects this design. Pride and pressure coexist closely, sometimes indistinguishably. Achievement brings validation, but rarely closure. There is always another level to reach, another risk to manage, another version of success to chase. For Australians accustomed to clearer endpoints and socially reinforced limits, this open-ended striving can feel both impressive and exhausting. The dream rewards motion, not arrival. Over time, comparisons emerge almost automatically. In Australia, the idea of a good life often includes predictability, shared standards, and the quiet assurance that falling behind does not mean falling through. In the American framework, meaning is more tightly linked to momentum. Security is something built individually, often visibly, and maintained through continued effort. This difference does not make one system superior, but it highlights how values quietly shape emotional expectations. What feels motivating in one context can feel relentless in another. Gradually, the initial image of the American dream dissolves into something more complex and less cinematic. It is not a single promise, but a series of trade-offs negotiated daily. It produces extraordinary drive and creativity, yet asks individuals to carry a heavier personal burden in return. Australians encountering this reality often realize that the dream was never about ease or comfort. It was about belief in forward movement, even when the ground feels uncertain. In the end, the American dream is not misunderstood so much as incomplete when viewed from afar. Distance softens its edges and amplifies its symbols. Closer observation reveals a system that thrives on ambition, resilience, and perpetual striving, while quietly demanding sacrifice as its entry price. And in that recognition, a broader insight emerges. Every culture builds its dreams around what it values most, and the true cost of those dreams is only visible once the myth gives way to lived reality.